how the concept of Tawheed plays a central role in generation of thought. Usually, Muslims as well as non-Muslims look on Tawheed as an article of faith. And therefore, once it is said that a person believes in Allah who is one and not many, then the chapter of Tawheed is closed. While throughout the Quran there is great emphasis on Tawheed, and the reason is everything in Islamic thought and culture springs out of Tawheed, which has not been properly understood and elaborated. In the beginning, we looked into ayat of the Quran which talk about unity or uniqueness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in His person, that He in His person is not comparable. But that's not the end of the story. But we find that this uniqueness applies in every area of life. Therefore, in His knowledge, He is unique. In His wisdom, He is unique. In His power, He is unique. And consequently, when He wants human beings to fashion their life, to design their life, to live their life, He cannot leave them to follow any other standard or principle than Tawheed, which means a milkman who sells milk, if this milkman puts water in milk, then he violates Tawheed, because he has made profit or money his God, instead of believing in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will give me barakah when I sell this, maybe 20 kilos instead of 30 kilos. When he adds water, he sells 30 kilos. When he does not add water, he sells 20 kilos. So when he is adding water, then he is violating the principle of Tawheed. Now we are trying to understand what are its social implications. The first important aspect is that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala tells in the Quran that it's a social obligation on family, on society, and ultimately on a state to make sure that those who are not married live a married life. A hadith tells us when someone commits immorality, he is committing shirk, because he has made pleasure an undefined pleasure, not legitimate pleasure, his God. To avoid shirk, the Quran goes for positive values, and positive value is that they should live a family life. It's something different that after all efforts, a person may not succeed in living married life. But something different to take it lightly and say, doesn't matter. Since Malthus said century ago, if you have more population, economic problems. Therefore, no need to get married and not to have children. When we take that approach, we are violating Tawheed. So the social aspect in this ayah is very, very clear that to complete Iman, as Hadith tells us, one should live a married life. Then you find that Tawheed is also the persuading force for fulfilling social obligations. In this ayah from Surah Al-Baqarah, the ayah begins by saying, it is not virtue, laysa al-birra an tuwallu wujuhakum qibala al-mashriq wal-maghrib, that you face towards east or the west, but the bir is what? To have total iman Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, tawheed, and that must be reflected in the behavior. Therefore it follows and says that while you believe in Allah and Akhirah and you are not fulfilling your social obligation toward the orphan, toward the needy, toward those who are going to face difficulties, then, and you're not liberating those who are enslaved, then you have not completed your faith. Tawheed means that all these aspects are done. Therefore, the ayah tells us that birr or virtue and taqwa are not hypothetical categories, they are not philosophical concepts, but these have to be reflected in all those activities which are mentioned, or else Tawheed is not understood. Tawheed must become social reality. When we deny food to hungry, when we deny education to illiterate, when we deny health to sick, then we are denying Tawheed. Tawheed requires that all these aspects should be fully. I requested them to bring this in order to less exertion on my part. Okay. Jazakallahu khairan. Then Tawheed at the same time requires that whatever good or virtue is discovered by an individual, that must be shared and experienced by the community. Therefore the Quran says that you are a community of believers who believe in Allah, and that obliges you to ultimately disseminate what is truth and right. When a person writes a research paper, he can write it and keep it in his laptop or a hard copy. What difference it makes? But when he publishes it and people read it, then he gets a call from 3M, Macintosh or anyone that can we use your patent as for commercial purposes. That means when you disseminate what you have done, then you are making use of knowledge. In Islam, knowledge is defined as ilm an-nafi, knowledge which is beneficial. And therefore maroof or good or virtue has to be not confined to ourselves, but it has to be shared. So the ayah says you should disseminate maroof, khair, and also at the same time make use of all your energies to suppress and reduce and remove and eliminate what is wrong. It's an ethical and moral responsibility on every believer that whatever good they know, that must be shared, and whatever wrong they notice is to be removed. This is why it is necessary that teachers particularly must understand it's their business to talk to students, discuss the issue of drugs, the issue of music, the issue of social media, where they are spending most of their time chatting, exchanging jokes, and not looking for serious material. If on social media there was an exchange of philosophical concepts, that look, I have read Ghazali and Ibn Taymiyyah and so, and this is the quote that refers with economy, then it's a blessing. Well, social media means, look how I appear with cosmetics, sharing my photograph. Social media means, look how funny I am, sharing a joke. Then it's waste of time, useless. The Quran calls that love, meaningless, abas. Therefore, the ayah tells us, positively you have to make sure whatever is good and virtuous and khair is to be disseminated, and whatever is unethical, immoral and undesirable, that has to be suppressed and removed. And that's why the application of Tawheed in social realm. Then development of a culture of dignity and modesty. Every society has its own norms. If you are born and raised in France and you meet a stranger, a chief executive of an organization, and you are also head of your institution, when you meet for the first time, you shake hand, not only that, but you touch cheeks together. In Japan, you don't do that, you bow down. In some places, you shake hand very warmly. Everywhere there is a norm, a culture. Islamic behavior, culture and norms all grow from Tawheed. And therefore, the Quran does not leave this chapter untouched. It links Iman with our behavior. How do we look on things? How we behave? How we educate our body to behave? When you are watching television and you see an obscene situation, should your eyes be glued to it or move from there? When you are sitting and someone talks vulgarity, would your ears stick to it and you enjoy, or you feel unhappy and dejected by that? It's a matter of training whole psyche. Human psyche is to be subjected not to instincts but to ethics and morality. Islamic paradigm of psyche and psychology is completely different. It's not based on SR, stimulus response. It is based on S, then ethics and R, which means there is a stimulus. But what does ethics tell me? My response should be based on that ethics. And all that takes place in a very, very short span of time. Some psychologists have introduced concept of emotional intelligence, and they tell us that your cognitive part of brain, which is here, forehead, but your emotional part, which is somewhere in the middle, amygdala, that reacts much faster than the cognitive part of brain. And consequently, they quote clinical examples and shows that human reactions are quite often dominated by their emotions and not by their reason. Among Muslim philosophers of science and psychology, for centuries there has been a concept of the role of mind and heart, how they link together. And the Quran quite often talks about hardening of hearts, not just of mind. The point here is not whether they are right or wrong. The point here is, should human being be subject to stimulus and response, or we need a different paradigm? Tawheed provides a different paradigm, and that paradigm is my mind and memory and emotions all are to be subjected to whatever response I have. Does it fall within the parameters of Tawheed or goes outside it? Therefore, if I am watching something unethical and immoral, whom I am following? My nafs, which is inviting me to do wrong, or my mind and my emotions which want me not to act just biologically but ethically. The whole Western paradigm of capitalism is based on biological and physical response. You create a market vacuum physically, prices hike. You create a demand of certain perfumes by marketing, and you sell your perfumes at exuberant prices. Everything is done. I'm very sorry for my bad throat, but anyhow, everything done in the existing world is essentially a matter of material, biological understanding of human being. The whole spectrum of psychology, sociology, economy, political science, biology, botany, everything is based on our borrowed ideas which tell us this is what truth is. And since from childhood we are told that, we never question it, we never doubt it. If Sigmund Freud has said something, we never try to find out why he said it. Was it this Jewish anxiety which led him to concoct those ideas, or was it really an empirical reality that led him to that? Therefore, when we are talking about Tawheed, then Tawheed provides the basis for behavioral and conceptual aspects. And this behavior you find here, the Quran tells us that believing men and women, no discrimination. It's not saying that women should cover themselves and men can go out in Bermudas. It's not saying that women should keep their gaze down and men should keep on following them with their eyes as long as possible. For both one and same principle. What does that mean? That means it's not gender driven, it's ethics driven. Ethics driven means ethics is one and same for whether you are a male or a female, a child or old, makes no difference. Therefore, the ayah tells us very clearly that those who are believers, what is their behavior regarding their everyday life? They cover up their beauty. They do not want to indulge in immorality. And there are situations where they can always beautify themselves, but in a given condition. And all this is linked directly with Tawheed. It's not a matter of some Maulvis who have come up with the idea. It's not a matter of some Arabs were doing it, so we are doing it. Islam is not a product of Arabian society. Islam came to change them and Islamize Arabs, not to Arabize the world. Very simple. We have always confused academically, in researches, everywhere, that we are following Arabian customs, Arabian laws, Arabian food, Arabian perfumes, Arabian dress, and so on and so forth. It has no basis whatsoever in Islam. No basis at all. The basis in Islam is only what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala likes, what pleases Him. And therefore, the legal system, social system, economic system, everything is based on divine principles. If you recall, in the beginning we referred to a simple diagram where an arrow was coming down, an arrow was going up. The arrow coming down indicates that it is given divine wisdom that creates social environment. While myself and you and your teachers and your forefathers and my forefathers, all of them were told that it's the equation from ground to upwards. You grow evolutionary in everything. So since we have been brought up in that environment, we can only see what we are conditioned. Unless you break this vicious circle, come out of intellectual cocoon in which you are born, then you can see the difference. So the ayah tells us very clearly that it is Tawheed that must determine what kind of behavior we should have. Any question till now? ये जो पूरी की पूरी गुफ्तगू है, ये कोई मेमोराइज्ड डायलॉग नहीं है, बल्कि मैं ये चाहता हूँ कि जो इश्यूज़ शायद आपने ज़्यादा गौर न किए हों, उन पर यहाँ पर गौर किया जाए। और आप हजरात जो कि पढ़े लिखे, ज़हीन और मुझसे ज़्यादा अपने शोबे को जानने वाले हैं, आप ये सवाल उठाएं ज़हन में कि जो कुछ कहा जा रहा है क्या वाकई दुरुस्त है या महज शायरी है। एंड ओनली देन we can benefit from this course. The course was not meant to give me opportunity to speak. Alhamdulillah, I have spoken globally. I don't need to address a group of people. The course is meant to interact and disagree on issues which we are discussing. When we disagree, then we learn more. So please don't think if you disagree with me, then I'll remember you and you will not get promotion. We don't have that culture in Riphah. We love people who disagree. Okay? So the impact of Tawheed on politics is also a very important dimension, because we always assume Islam means religion, religion means worship and devotion, Umrah and Salat and Roza and so on and so forth, while politics means following Harold J. Lasky, what he says in his textbook on political science. Whatever has been said by Voltaire and X, Y and Z about political power. The fact of the matter is, the Quran very clearly mentions that sovereignty, political power belongs to only Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And that means when we say our parliament is final judge, parliament decides what is right and wrong. then we are assigning parliament or people that sovereignty which belongs to only Allah. Tawheed demands that we should have a parliament, but that parliament should use its wisdom and its authority in order to finding out what pleases Allah and what annoys Allah. If it annoys Allah to allow an automobile to run at 240 kilometers an hour, then law must be made to stop and tell, if you exceed 120 kilometers, we'll fine you. Not because people want it, but because Allah has said, do not kill yourself. When you are running your automobile at 240 kilometers an hour, you are killing yourself. Your whole body mechanism, your physique, your mental state, the level of tension, even your physical responses are very much different. That's why you find an airplane pilot cannot survive too long. They can hardly steer a plane for 8 or 9 hours. Then they need rest. They cannot do it. Physically, biologically, psychologically. Therefore, in political life, if you want to make political decisions, then what should be done? So the Quran says very clearly, authority to govern rests only with Allah. He has commanded that you serve none but Him. This is the right way. ذَلِكَ دِينُ الْقَيِّمِ. And many people don't know. So, firstly, that sovereignty belongs to Allah alone. Secondly, integration of the so-called religious and secular concepts. We always assume that political life is something secular, while life in the temple, in church and masjid is religious. Therefore, a parliamentarian elected by the people on Friday must take a shower and put a nice dress and perfume and go to masjid and say, Allah, you are great. I bow down my head in front of you. No one greater than you. When he's inside the parliament, he said, I am everything. My vote matters, and I must get my share from the stolen money to improve my village. Therefore, he must get public fund, PSD, and use for building his own homes, inner roads, not public. This is right. When he is in masjid, he is saying, Allah, you are great. When he is here, what is great? His chaudrahat, his personal glory, his personal benefit, his glamour. When a musician climbs a stage and start doing all kind of aerobics, and then people applaud, then what does he say? I did it. It's me who are doing it. When a cricketer takes 3 wickets in a row, he flies in the air and shows me who has done it. What's at that point God? Power, skill, trick, or something else. Therefore, Tawheed is not a matter of a separate theological concept that God is one and not 2 or 3. But it is essentially the main motivating force for thought creation. What kind of political thought, social thought, psychological thought, economic thought we need to create, all that depends on our concept of Tawheed, and that does not permit this separation between what is sacred or what is secular. There is no such division in Islam. Everything in Islam is given by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and therefore no secularity exists. A hadith, as Iqbal quotes in his lecture, says, Allah has made all this land a masjid for you. Which means there is no separation, that pray only in masjid and not on a patch of grass, not on road, not on the deck of a boat. Wherever you are, you pray. If all this is masjid, then where is secularity? Where is king? Where is power? Where is intrigues? Nowhere. So, and thirdly, vicegerency of man as Amin, Imam, Khalifa, Amir, Mas'ul. I hope these terms are known to you. When we say Amin, means trustworthy. When we say Imam, means leader. When we say Khalifa, means Allah's representative. When we say Amir, means whoever is the leader or leading us. And Mas'ul, one who is accountable. From Sawal, Mas'ul. So man's vicegerency means giving authority and power, at the same time questionable, answerable to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Or in simple words, realization of total deen in its comprehensive manner. For what we said a while ago, the Quran tells us that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made human beings Khalifa. That was said before human being was created. In this one single sentence of the Quran, you find a world of meaning. Firstly, the whole concept which me and you and many of people have been told, that human beings were meant to live in Jannah. Sayyidina Hawa is the main culprit responsible for our coming to earth. No basis at all. The Quran says, Allah, before He created Adam, told angels, I am going to create a Khalifa on earth, not in Jannah. Therefore, this whole myth or story that we were supposed to be living in Jannah and Eve or Hawa persuaded, so she has to be blamed in literature, in everything, has no basis in Islam. That is possible in Christianity and Judaism, not in Islam. Secondly, it means there is no one single group of people who can claim they have a divine right. When Allah says, I have made human being Khalifa, then no group of mullahs, no group of Pope and his followers, clergy, can say that we have a divine right. The concept which has been quite often discussed in our country, that if Islam is implemented, we'll have theocracy, is a highly confused and borrowed concept. Theocracy means when Catholic Church was ruling Europe till late 16th century, it was Pope who was everything. They were authorized to throw Galileo from the Pisa Tower with their command, because they think it's against Christianity. Rule of church means rule of terror, and that is the meaning of theocracy. In Islam, if everyone is potential Khalifa, can you have theocracy? No sacred right to any people. Therefore, Islam does not allow theocracy, although those who don't know Islam and write in our newspapers and come on TV channels and always talk about theocracy, they don't know even what is theocracy in Europe. They just use the term. So, second thing is that everyone, and lastly, Khalifa means a person who is given authority in the given framework, not an independent person. We have governors in provinces. They are responsible to president, not to prime minister. They cannot do in their own way they want unless they get approval from the president of Pakistan. You have a deputy commissioner, under commissioner, he cannot act against it. Similarly, when the Quran says you are a deputy of Allah, then it means that the Khalifa must understand what his boss, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, wants and how he should behave. So Khilafah does not mean kingship. Unfortunately, again, because of our misconceptions that in Saudi Arabia we have two very honorable places we visit for Umrah and Hajj. Therefore, Saudi Arabia is ideal. Not at all. In Iran, we have Qum and so and so, where there are some very pious people buried. Therefore, it is superior. No, at all. That does not allow, make, or legitimize the rule that exists in those countries. Kingdom by itself is un-Islamic. How can it become a model for us? Impossible. Yet, from your childhood, you are told, Islam means Saudi Arabia. Islam means such a country. All this is a fable, not truth at all. This ayah tells very clearly that if Khilafah is violated, if they think they are king and not under Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then it is shirk. It's against Tawheed. So the implications of these terms are extremely important to be understood, and that also removes hundreds of misconceptions we have in our own history. The other ayah tells us very clearly, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows some people to excel over others. It's just like if we say that we will have a 100-meter race of female faculty, 100-meter race of male faculty, both in separate enclosures. Do you think all of them will be winners? Simple. Many factors responsible. Therefore, the ayah says something very simple truth. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows people to improve, but some do not improve. Some improve. Those who improve deserve to be recognized. So, when darajat are mentioned, does not mean darajat are permanent, forever. When the Quran says men have one daraja, superiority over women, does not mean it is absolute. It only means because of certain responsibilities and reasons. We need that. Shouldn't we say that we want to have a department of chemistry but no head? Can we think of a department of surgery without a surgeon as head? Can we just take any society in the world without, in the name of equality? No, you must have. Therefore, this a level of difference does not mean discrimination. Does not mean that people are not equal. No, people are equal, yet you have to, for meaningful living, you need to have that kind of daraja. So the Quran says, we have made people our vicegerent, yet there are some who are better. Then what is the obligation of political power when you are given authority as ruler, as caliph, as president, as prime minister? The Quran says, if we give them authority, then they are commissioned and required to do 4 important jobs. Their obligation. First is to make sure that there is a salat established in society, which means facility for salat, persuasion, education and training. Second, economic system should not be exploitative, but you should have economic system which is based on justice and fairness, in which zakat is applicable. Thirdly, Amr bil Ma'ruf, that state is not silent observer. State cannot say we have private channels funded by external agencies and we don't know what they are doing. No, state has obligation to make sure that only virtue or good prevails, and whatever is wrong and obscene is not dominating. It's state responsibility. So these 4 functions are given by the Quran, which means that the Quran has not left this area of political authority undefined. And then at the same time, realization of total deen, which means that deen is not a matter of mazhab. Mazhab is an Arabic term, not Urdu term, but never used by the Quran or by the Sunnah. The Quran and Sunnah only use one term, that your deen is Islam. Therefore, Aqama of deen means Aqama of total deen, which envelops every aspect of life, not confined to going to masjid. Any question till now?
सर पॉलिटिकली जो आपने 70 नंबर स्लाइड पे सर आपने कहा कि जो खलीफा हो उसमें जेंडर में मेन दिया हुआ है. इज दैट अ मैन एक्चुअली और हु एवर कैन बी अ खलीफा, फीमेल और मेल?
You see, when we read the Quran, it becomes very clear that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has made human beings His Khalifa. Otherwise, the Quran will not say that believing men and women must do following things. Quite often it says believing men, mu'minun wal mu'minat. Sometimes it just says mu'minin, does not say mu'minat. But when it says mu'minin, it includes by definition women. It's not addressing only male. The structure of language is such, which is different than the structure of English or French or Urdu. Secondly, we'll talk about it in more detail when we come to the Islamic political system. We have a whole module on that. But very briefly, nowhere in Islamic thought there is a gender obsession. It's only a gift of Western culture and thought that we have a gender obsession. In social science research, whether you are writing something as a psychologist, sociologist, or even as a medical doctor, when you want to collect data, what's the basis? How many male, how many females? How many carrying a degree of X and how many of Y? How many age X, how many Y? Everything that you are taught in research methodology is based on a separation of two genders. Were these women of that age or the different age? Therefore, the mindset never liberates itself from gender obsession. Islamic approach, the Quran uses terminology which is not neutral, but it does not focus on gender, but focuses on the ethical dimension of men and women, and quite often uses a phrase which applies to both. So, you find quite often there is no separation. Your question is specifically, hypothetically, a female can be head of institution, which means in terms of principle it is possible. But there are several principles which cannot be found applicable in given situations. We'll go in details when I talk about political system, what are those problems. But in principle, Islam does not. At the same time, it is wrong to say that since a few instances in history show us that a female climbed a camel and led an army, or a female became ruler in the Mamluk period, or someone else, therefore Islam allows. No. We'll go in detail about that when we come to the point. But the issue should be very clear that we cannot mix principles with contingencies. Two separate things. In your own country, the ulama who are always blamed to discriminate against women, when you were not born, and I'm eyewitness of that, when we had in 1958 a coup by Ayub Khan, and in 61 he announced that he wanted to have a referendum to become life president. At that point, the opposition parties got together. What should we do? They put a candidate. His name was Azam Khan, a retired general also. He was put under house arrest by Ayub Khan. They thought of a second person. He was again put on list to be house arrested. Then they again got together and they said, okay, let's ask Madar-e-Millat Fatima Jinnah to become candidate. He cannot arrest her. So they went to her, and the lady flatly refused. And she was a lady of nerves like her brother. Very strong opinions. No way. They kept pleading till they said, okay, how about you accept candidacy, and if you are elected, then you hold impartial elections and let people decide. She said, this is acceptable to me. On that, Mufti Azam Pakistan at that time, Mufti Muhammad Shafi, issued written fatwa in writing. In this given situation, Islam permits her to be head of state. Ahmad-Pgd was in prison during this period. He was released after 9 months or 10 months from prison, and he traveled all over the country to endorse the fatwa of Mufti Muhammad Shafi, that whatever he has said. It's totally incorrect and unauthentic to say that Islam is against women, or so-called ulama are always against women, or Islam has a gender consciousness. That is a separate issue, but since you raised the question, I have just made a small comment. What are the requirements for holding a political office will be discussed when we talk about political system.
सर, जो अब तक हमने डिस्कस किया उसमें 2-3 बार आयात में अमर बिल मारूफ की बात आई है, और सर एक हेडिंग में था रियलाइजेशन ऑफ मारूफ. तो सर इन दोनों में बैलेंस किस तरह से किया जाए कि हम एज ए टीचर किस लेवल तक अमर मतलब हुक्म दे सकते हैं मारूफ का, और क्या बेहतर है कि हम किस तरह से रियलाइज़ कराएं मारूफ. क्योंकि सर एविडेंट बाज़ औक़ात ऐसा हो जाता है कि बच्चों को अगर पब्लिकली स्नैप किया जाए तो वो और इस तरह से बात चली जाती है, वो उसको नेगेटिव ले लेते हैं, या थोड़ी सी टाइम के लिए वो उस पर अमल करते हैं और बाहर फिर बाद में हमें वही सिचुएशन नज़र आती है. तो इसमें किस तरह से हमारे
You are perfectly right. Islam has an ethics for everything, and therefore, unfortunately, those who join teaching profession, not all of them are born to be teachers, but they think they can do it. Like you have a mediocre car repair mechanic and an expert car repair mechanic. The adab or ethics of warning, correction is not by whip, but by a very polite message, not by public insult, but by respectful way of talking in a generalized manner, or even specifically, but not to humiliate any person. Unfortunately, when we become teachers, we are either tyrants or sellable commodity. When we are tyrants, then we think whatever we say is ultimate truth, and students must obey and follow it. When we are a commodity, then we want to get ranking from students by pleasing them, favoring them, and never caring about what is right and wrong. And both are wrong. A teacher who is not correcting behavior of students is no teacher at all. I don't have to come to a class to learn a lesson in microbiology. I can go online and download it, and in short period of time learn better than the teacher. Why should I come to class? But I need to come to class because I must understand how different factors work together, and that can only be done by a presence of a teacher. If he is not doing it, he is not teaching. He is a tape recorder. I think we underestimate ourselves if we think that teachers cannot change, or teachers should feel afraid, or a teacher in department of physiotherapy on this campus cannot stop a student of media science or medical. This is your underestimation. For us, every teacher has the authority to implement university rules and regulations in his department or other departments. Makes no difference. But unfortunately, the dominant understanding for centuries has been that if you are a medical doctor, only in medical faculty you can have your role, not elsewhere. Now, the word maruf, root word arafa, refers to what is not only given but what is known. Therefore, maruf means that good which is not only given by someone but which is universally accepted. Should we define and say that a grandchild or a child should not slap grandfather or father or mother and put it on a notice board as a notification? Or it's something maruf, it's something known, never expected. So truth in Islam refers to all those aspects. Therefore, the Quran says, وَاشْرُهُنَّ بِالْمَعْرُوفِ, and live with your wives with most appropriate, maruf, known, good manner. Not that you treat them your property, treat them your slaves, treat them your cooks. So when a proposal comes, the young boy should ask his mother, how does she cook? How does she design the interior home? Does she know French cuisines? You're not marrying a cook or a house designer. You are going to have a life partner. But our concepts, since we are corrupted by the West with all those conditions, we look for that. If not that, is she going to bring a Mercedes Benz with her? Or is she going to get a piece of land given to her as a gift? All those questions which are raised have no basis whatsoever. Therefore, the Quran says, "Ashurna bil maruf," and live with them with most ethical, most polite, most conducive manner. So, maruf is used in the Quran in so many places. Here, maruf means that you have to make sure that public good is protected. So if someone you find on a motorbike going zigzag on a very heavy traffic road, then it's your obligation to stop the person, confiscate driving license, fine him, educate him. If you don't do it, you will have accidents and he will lose life also. Therefore, maruf is always coupled with do things in a good manner, but something wrong, stop wrong at the same time. So teachers have an obligation, whatever they are teaching. If they are teaching biochemistry, it's their obligation to make sure that their students understand how to talk, how to train their body, how to see things, how to disagree, how to talk to a female student. You cannot, in the name of exchanging notes for 2 hours, chat with her, and when you are checked, you say, well, I was just discussing a very important academic issue. It's ridiculous. Therefore, teachers have primary obligation to ensure that whatever is known as good, maruf, is fully observed by them. Is it clear?
मैं ये कहना चाह रही हूँ सर कि हमें मेक श्योर करना है, इंश्योर कराना है कि वो सही जो मारूफ है वो करें, तो उसका तरीका किस तरह से हम ऐसा अपनाएं कि वो रियलाइज़ करें मारूफ को, बजाय इसके कि हम सख्ती से उनसे अमल करवाएं।
आपने जवाब खुद फराहम कर दिया है कि बजाय सख्ती से डरा कर, धमका कर, घुरक कर के बात करने के, अगर आपकी गुफ्तगू का अंदाज़ नरम है, मोहब्बत का है और बार बार है, वो असर करेगा। एक दफ़ा कह देना कभी काफ़ी नहीं हो सकता। मुझे बताइए, जिस घर में कोई बच्चा 2.5-3 साल का पाया जाता है, आप उससे दिन में 1 मरतबा कहते हैं नहीं या 900 मरतबा कहते हैं? Any child, anywhere in the world, then how can we expect an adult who is used to doing something, you just tell the person once, it will be enough? No. You have to keep on doing it again and again. लेकिन ये बात बिल्कुल दुरुस्त है कि जैसे मैंने कहा था कि हर चीज़ का एक अदब है. You cannot correct by offending. You can only correct without offending when you talk politely, sometimes separately, sometimes in a group, in a general manner. When we made this mentoring in the university, during orientation, we always tell them that mentoring is not a matter of singling out a person and then criticizing. अगर आपके इल्म में ये है भी कि एक तालिब इल्म को आपने स्मोकिंग करते हुए देखा है कहीं, आपको इत्तला मिली है और आप चाहते हैं मेंटरिंग क्लास में उसको हिदायत करना, तो ये कहना कि उमर यू वर फाउंड स्मोकिंग ऑन मीज़ान कैंपस, नेवर डू इट अगेन in presence of 15 others is not advisable at all. That means you don't know how to do it. Nevertheless, in presence of 15 people, we can always say that some students, because of their peer pressure, दोस्तों के दबाव में या खुद अपने आप को ज़ाहिर करने के लिए कि मैं एक एडल्ट हूँ, स्मोक करते हैं, ये एक अच्छी चीज़ नहीं है, क्योंकि मेडिकली, अखलाक़ी तौर पर और ख़ुद माहौल के नुक़्ते निगाह से जो काम वो कर रहा है वो बहुत नुकसानदेह। अब ये बात आपने एक जनरल बात कही ना, आपने, यू डिड नॉट से उमर यू हैव डन इट, बट यू एक्सप्लेन दैट. Umar will get the point definitely. Having said that, if you again find, then summon Umar in your office individually and tell him, listen, this is a official warning to you. If you are not going to change yourself, we are going to fine you or even expel you. So step by step, using logic, using reason, and quite often using examples in front of students to show how things can improve. So this is the normal way of how we are supposed to do it. So Tawheed has also implication in economic life, and therefore the Quran says very clearly that you have to make sure that your economic activities are not based on interest. But that's not the only thing. Any kind of unethical activity should be avoided. Interest is one of those, rather a major one. But others, like quality control. If someone has an order for 900 tons of steel to be provided, and the gauge of steel is specified, but the person makes a very, very small difference in the gauge and makes a profit out of it. This is against Tawheed. Tawheed means that you have to fulfill that promise which has been done. So economic system should not be exploitative. It should be, therefore, ethical economic practices are the Quranic command, and that means Tawheed is being observed in our ethical issues. Similarly, it wants the earnings to be shared, and the Quran says here and elsewhere very clearly that whatever earnings you have are not just yours. We normally assume that whatever I am earning as my salary is my money. The Quran says no, this we are giving you as a trust. In it is right of people who are needy and hungry and orphan and deprived and in debt and so on and so forth. So the whatever is acquired as wealth is not to be accumulated but to be distributed. Similarly, the teaching of Tawheed has direct implication in law. In this ayah you find very clearly that a person, male or female, who commits adultery, immorality, we should not have tenderness for them, and it should not stop you from implementing deen of Allah, which means that Tawheed requires that instead of following one's own heart, one should follow what Allah has commanded in all legal matters. Same applies to theft. Again, we find the same concept. The Quran talks that you should make sure that whatever Prophet is saying is to be implemented. Supremacy of Sharia is emphasized again and again in the Quran, and in this ayah also it tells us that the book has been revealed which confirms what was revealed earlier, and therefore it has to be implemented. In view of that, the Quran tells us that human creation was meant in order to serve Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Illa liya'budun. This serving or ibadah, as I said earlier, is not confined to making prayer or fasting or zakat, but this means when Tawheed is fully implemented in every aspect of life. Again, the same meaning is elaborated in this ayah, how Allah has created human being and how he is supposed to be behaving. The ayah also tells us that human beings are not a byproduct, but they are created in their own right, fi ahsani taqwim, in best form. The Quran essentially wants Tawheed to change and transform our behavior through a moral process. So, success and good living is linked in this ayah with our behavior pattern. Those who observe their prayers and zakah, and those who use their property properly, they are the persons who are observing their commitment to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It wants people to understand the meaning of patience, perseverance, and how they can be content with what Allah has given them. And then it also wants them to have Allah consciousness all the time, that whatever they are doing is in the notice of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It tells us what kind of people they should be, the ibad, the servants of Allah. They are not extravagant, they are not using harsh language, they are not observing unethical means, and so on and so forth. Conclusion. When we talk about Tawheed, then essentially what we mean is unity of the Creator and the Sustainer implies there is nothing divine except Allah. Nature is not divine. Animals are not divine. Unfortunately, human beings have worshipped nature, animals, and as well as non-animate objects. So none of them are divine except Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Secondly, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is totally other. We cannot compare Him with anything. His existence, His person, everything is by itself unique. Third, the purpose of human creation is no more than to serve the Rabb, the owner, and therefore Allah, the most merciful, would like His servants to serve Him. And that tells us that Tawheed is in not only in person but also in attributes of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Whatever attributes you find in the name of His beautiful names, all those. We have just these 3 recommended readings for you on this subject, and we'll now start with our next lecture, inshallah.